Ask any wrestler who came up in the territories during the 1980s to name the most naturally gifted big man they ever saw step through the ropes, and you will hear a lot of different answers. Some will say Andre, some will say Vader, some will point to one of the Von Erichs. But if you ask the men who were actually in the ring during that golden age, the ones who traded holds with all of them, a startling number will give you the same name. A name that most casual fans today have never even heard. Terry Gordy. They called him Bam Bam, and the reason they called him that was simple. When Terry Gordy hit you, it felt like the world had ended. Here was a man who was already a full-time professional wrestler before most kids his age had learned to drive. A man who was main eventing sold-out arenas as a teenager. A man who conquered Texas, conquered Japan, and became one half of what many experts consider the single most dominant tag team in the history of the business. He had the size of a monster and the agility of a cruiserweight. He could throw a dropkick that looked like it belonged to a man 100 pounds lighter. He could deliver a powerbomb that folded grown men in half, and he did all of it with a cold, businesslike efficiency that made him terrifying to watch. But this is not just a story about greatness. Because for all his gifts, for everything he accomplished, Terry Gordy is also one of the great tragedies of professional wrestling. A cautionary tale about what the road does to a man, about how the very lifestyle that made these legends larger than life could also destroy them from the inside out. By the time it was all over, this once invincible athlete had been reduced to a shadow. He had to relearn how to walk, how to talk, how to be the man he once was. And he never fully got there. This is the story of the greatest wrestler you probably never heard of. The story of the Prodigy who had everything, lost most of it, and died far too young. This is the life and death of Terry Bam Bam Gordy. To understand Terry Gordy, you have to understand where he came from. He was born Terry Ray Gordy on the 23rd of April, 1961, and raised in the shadow of Chattanooga, Tennessee, right along the Georgia line. This was working-class Southern country. Hard country, the kind of place where a young man was expected to be tough, to work with his hands, and to never back down from anybody. And Terry was tough. He was also, by every account, an exceptional natural athlete. At Rossville High School, he was a standout in both football and baseball, the kind of kid coaches build teams around. He had the frame, the coordination, and the competitive fire to have gone a long way in either sport if he had wanted to. But Terry Gordy didn't want a normal life. He had fallen in love with professional wrestling, and once that hook was set, nothing else mattered. He dropped out of high school after his freshman year. Think about that for a second. This kid, gifted enough to have a real athletic future, walked away from school as a teenager because he had already decided what he was going to be. He was going to be a wrestler. And here is where the legend really begins, because Terry Gordy started wrestling for real at the age of 13. 13 years old, he was trained by a genuinely terrifying character named Archie Gouldy, better known to wrestling fans as the Mongolian Stomper, a rugged, no-nonsense veteran who taught the business the old, stiff, painful way. Under Gouldy's guidance, this 13-year-old boy began working shows for the International Wrestling Association under the name Terry Mecca. Now, in the modern era, the idea of a 13-year-old wrestling grown men on professional cards is almost impossible to imagine. It would never happen today. But this was a different time. The territory system was a rough, unregulated world. And if you could go, you could work. And Terry Gordy could go. He was big for his age, freakishly strong, and he learned fast. He looked like a man years before he was one. It was during these early years, training and traveling through the South and through Mississippi, that Terry Gordy crossed paths with a flamboyant, charismatic young performer named Michael Hayes. And that meeting would change the course of wrestling history. Because in early 1979, Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes formed a team. They called themselves the Fabulous Freebirds. And soon a third member, the cagey veteran Buddy Roberts, would join them to complete the trio. The Freebirds were something the wrestling business had never quite seen before. Michael Hayes was the mouth, the strutting, preening, silver-tongued frontman who could talk a crowd into a frenzy. Buddy Roberts was the sneaky, experienced ring general who knew every trick in the book. And Terry Gordy was the muscle, the enforcer, the wrecking ball who did the heavy lifting and dished out the real punishment. When trouble started, and with the Freebirds trouble always started, it was Gordy who finished it. And they brought an attitude to the ring that felt genuinely dangerous. They took their name from the Lynyrd Skynyrd song. They embraced a rowdy, rebellious, southern rock persona, and they became one of the very first acts in wrestling to march to the ring to their own entrance music. Today, every single wrestler has a theme song. It is a fundamental part of the show. But the Freebirds were pioneers of that idea, turning their walk to the ring into an event unto itself. They also, whether by accident or design, created one of the most enduring concepts in tag team wrestling. Because the Freebirds were a group of 3, but tag titles are held by 2 men. So they operated on a simple principle. Any 2 of them could defend the championship on any given night. The champions got to choose. It gave them a permanent numbers advantage and a permanent escape hatch, and it drove opponents and audiences crazy. To this day, that concept is known throughout the industry as the Freebird rule. 3 men invented it, and Terry Gordy was one of them. The Freebirds first made noise in the Georgia territory, wrestling on Georgia Championship Wrestling, which aired nationally on cable superstation WTBS. This was one of the biggest platforms in all of wrestling at the time, beamed into homes all across America. And it gave the country its first real look at what Terry Gordy could do. One moment from those Georgia days tells you everything about the kind of impact he made. In a match against Ted, the future $1 million man, and the Junkyard Dog, Gordy got Ted in position and delivered 4 consecutive pile drivers, one after another, driving him skull first into the mat. The angle was designed to be shocking, and it was. Ted was stretchered out of the arena and loaded into an ambulance, and fans who saw it never forgot it. That was Gordy's calling card. Devastation. By 1980, the Freebirds were recognized as one of the best teams in the entire sport. But their greatest chapter and Terry Gordy's ascent to true main event immortality was still ahead of them, and it would happen in Texas. In late 1982, the Fabulous Freebirds arrived in Dallas to work for World Class Championship Wrestling. World Class was one of the hottest promotions in the entire country, built around the local heroes of the territory, the handsome, athletic, beloved Von Erich brothers, David, Kevin, Kerry, and later Mike, the sons of promoter Fritz Von Erich. To the fans of Texas, the Von Erichs were gods, homegrown champions who could do no wrong, and into that world walked the Freebirds. At first, incredibly, they were actually allies of the Von Erichs. But that was not going to last, because what happened next would ignite one of the most famous, most passionate, and most profitable feuds in the entire history of professional wrestling. It was Christmas night, 1982, the Christmas Star Wars show. The main event was Kerry Von Erich challenging the great Ric Flair for the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Championship, the most prestigious prize in the sport, inside a steel cage. And in a twist that thrilled the Texas crowd, Michael Hayes of the Freebirds had been installed as the special guest referee, a supposed friend of the Von Erichs there to make sure Kerry got a fair shake. For a while, it looked like the Freebirds were on Kerry's side. Hayes seemed ready to help him win the title. But then things got chaotic, as they always did. In the confusion, Hayes ended up outside the cage, and it appeared to Terry Gordy, watching from ringside, that Kerry had betrayed his partner. Gordy's loyalty to Hayes was absolute, so Terry Gordy did what Terry Gordy did. He slammed the heavy steel cage door shut directly on Kerry Von Erich's head. The arena came unglued. Kerry lost his chance at the world title, and in that instant, the Freebirds turned on the Von Erichs, and Texas erupted into a wrestling war that would rage for years. It is difficult to overstate how hot this feud was. The Von Erichs, wholesome all-American heroes, against the Freebirds, arrogant, cheating, long-haired rebels who thumbed their noses at everything the Texas fans held dear. They sold out arenas across the entire state, night after night. They fought in cages, they fought in strap matches and country whipping matches. They fought in handcuff matches. They fought under any stipulation the bookers could dream up, and the fans could not get enough. The 1984 battle between the Freebirds and the Von Erichs was so intense, so brutal, that it was named Match of the Year by the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And at the center of it all was Terry Gordy. Because while Michael Hayes was the loudmouth the fans loved to hate, Gordy was the one who scared them. He was the physical threat, the guy who could genuinely hurt their heroes. When Terry Gordy locked up with Kerry or Kevin Von Erich, it felt like a real fight. He gave the whole thing its danger, its edge, its sense that at any moment something terrible could happen. It was during this run in Texas that a wrestler named Killer Khan taught Gordy a vicious move called the Oriental Spike, a thumb thrust to the throat that Gordy adopted as the Asiatic Spike, and it became one of his signature weapons. By the mid-80s, Terry Gordy was one of the most respected performers in all of wrestling. He was still only in his early 20s, and already he was a veteran of a decade in the business. Now, the Freebirds did have a brief and infamous run in the biggest company of them all. In August of 1984, they debuted in the World Wrestling Federation, Vince McMahon's rapidly expanding national juggernaut. This could have been their ticket to superstardom on the grandest stage, but it lasted all of about 9 weeks. According to the accounts that have come out over the years, the Freebirds were fired after showing up to a show late and drunk, and just like that, their World Wrestling Federation run was over almost before it began. It was the first real public glimpse of the demons that traveled with these men. The hard living, the partying, the lifestyle that was as much a part of the territory era as the wrestling itself. But Gordy's career was far from finished. Some of his greatest work was still to come. In 1986, wrestling in the Universal Wrestling Federation, the promotion that had grown out of Bill Watts' legendary Mid-South territory, Terry Gordy became the very first UWF heavyweight champion. He held that title for 6 months, cementing his status as a top-tier singles star, not just a tag team wrestler. That same year, he was named the Most Improved Wrestler of the Year by Pro Wrestling Illustrated and the Best Brawler by the Wrestling Observer. He was, by any measure, one of the elite big men in the entire sport. And yet, for all that he had accomplished in America, the place where Terry Gordy would truly become a legend was on the other side of the world. Terry Gordy's relationship with Japan began in the early 80s, and it would come to define the second half of his career. He started working for All Japan Pro Wrestling, one of the two great pillars of Japanese wrestling, a promotion run by the towering, revered Giant Baba, and Japan fell in love with Terry Gordy. You have to understand what Japanese wrestling was like in that era. It was stiff, it was hard-hitting. It was built on the idea that these were real fights between real warriors, and the fans demanded intensity and legitimacy above all else. It was a style that would eat alive a lot of American performers who couldn't hack it. But Terry Gordy was born for it. His combination of size, toughness, and pure athletic ability made him a perfect fit. The Japanese fans respected men who could genuinely go, and Gordy could genuinely go. He learned from the very best. It was in Japan that the legendary Lou Thez, one of the greatest and most respected champions in wrestling history, taught Terry Gordy the powerbomb. That move would become Gordy's signature finisher, a devastating maneuver where he would hoist an opponent onto his shoulders and drive them down onto their back with terrifying force. In Gordy's hands, it looked like a match ender every single time. His arrival in that world came with a stamp of legitimacy that few outsiders ever received. When Gordy debuted for All Japan in the summer of 1983, he was slotted straight into the biggest matches on the biggest cards, even taking part in the great Terry Funk's first retirement match. The company did not ease him in. They threw him into the deep end against the very best because they could see that he belonged there. And over the following decade, he proved them right against a murderer's row of Japanese legends. He battled the mighty Jumbo Tsuruta for the top championship in the promotion. He waged war with the emerging aces of the next generation, men like Mitsuharu Misawa, Toshiaki Kawada, and Akira Taue, who are today regarded as some of the greatest wrestlers who ever lived. Terry Gordy did not just survive in that environment. He thrived, he stood shoulder to shoulder with the immortals, and he more than held his own. He was paired early on with the fearsome American import Stan Hansen, and together they won the coveted All Japan World Tag Team Championship. But it was his next partnership that would ascend into legend. In 1990, Terry Gordy teamed up with another rugged American, Steve Williams, a former college wrestling and football star known to fans as Dr. Death. And together they formed a team called the Miracle Violence Connection. The name was perfect, because that is exactly what they delivered: miracle violence. The Miracle Violence Connection was, quite simply, one of the most dominant tag teams the wrestling world has ever seen. These were two enormous, legitimately tough, world-class athletes who could out-wrestle you, out-brawl you, and outpower you. There was no answer for them. In All Japan, they tore through the competition, defeating the greatest teams that Japan could put in front of them and winning the World Tag Team Championship over and over again. Gordy and Williams held those titles a remarkable number of times across the early 90s. And Gordy's singles success in Japan reached its peak as well. He captured the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship, the single most important prize in All Japan Pro Wrestling, the belt that represented the absolute top of the mountain. He held it twice, trading it back and forth with the mighty Stan Hansen. For an American foreigner to reach that level of respect and success in the demanding, insular world of Japanese wrestling was almost unheard of. Terry Gordy did it. But even here, in the middle of his greatest triumphs, the darkness was never far away. In July of 1990, at the absolute height of his powers, Terry Gordy collapsed while drinking at a bar in Tokyo. He was rushed to a hospital by ambulance, and at one point his heart actually stopped. He went into cardiac arrest. His condition was so grave that All Japan officials were literally preparing to announce his death to the public. Terry Gordy, one of the toughest men alive, came within a hair's breadth of dying in a hospital bed in Japan at the age of 29. But he survived. He recovered. He vacated his championship, and within about a month, incredibly, he was back in the ring resuming his path of destruction. He seemed unbreakable, like nothing could stop him. It was a warning sign, a flashing red light about the toll that his lifestyle was taking on his body. But like so many warnings in the world of wrestling, it went unheeded. The Miracle Violence Connection was so good that they conquered America too. In 1992, Gordy and Williams brought their act to World Championship Wrestling, and immediately did the same thing they had done everywhere else. They dominated. They won the World Championship Wrestling World Tag Team Championship, and then 1 week later won the National Wrestling Alliance World Tag Team Championship in a tournament, unifying the two titles and establishing themselves as the undisputed best team in the company. During this period, they were considered the most dominant tag team in the entire sport, and they were reportedly earning somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 a week, extraordinary money for tag team wrestlers at the time. There was a moment where World Championship Wrestling wanted to build a massive feud between the Miracle Violence Connection and the Steiner brothers. A battle billed as the best team of All Japan against the best team of rival New Japan Pro Wrestling. It was a dream match on paper. But here is a detail that tells you something important about Terry Gordy's character. When New Japan tried to lure Gordy and Williams away, they refused. Out of loyalty to Giant Baba, the man who had given them their platform in All Japan, they would not do it. That loyalty ultimately led to Gordy leaving World Championship Wrestling. In a business full of men who would sell out anyone for an extra dollar, Terry Gordy honored his word. He remembered who had been good to him. By this point in the early 90s, Terry Gordy had done it all. Territorial legend in Texas, champion in America, icon in Japan, half of the most dominant tag team in the world. He was barely 30 years old, and he had already assembled a Hall of Fame career. The sky was the limit. And then came the day that changed everything. It was the 18th of August, 1993. Terry Gordy was traveling from the United States to Japan for yet another All Japan tour, one of the countless long-haul flights across the Pacific that had become a routine part of his life. But on this trip, something went horribly wrong. During the journey, Terry Gordy overdosed on pain medication. According to accounts of the incident, he had taken a massive quantity of pills, and the result was catastrophic. Somewhere in the air, or upon arrival, Terry Gordy slipped into a coma, and he did not come out of it for 5 days. 5 days, and when he finally regained consciousness, the damage had been done. The oxygen deprivation, the trauma to his brain, had left him with permanent brain damage. Think about the cruelty of that. This magnificent athlete, this man whose entire life and identity were built on his physical gifts, his coordination, his strength, his ability to do things in a wrestling ring that almost no one else on earth could do. And in the space of a few days, all of it was taken from him. Terry Gordy had to relearn how to talk. He had to relearn how to walk. He had to relearn how to wrestle. He had to rebuild, from scratch, the basic functions that most of us take completely for granted. And the people who knew him, who loved him, watched it happen. The men who had traveled the roads with him described the change with heartbreak in their voices. The old Terry Gordy had been sharp, funny, a jokester, full of life. The man who emerged from that coma was different, calmer, often confused, lost in a fog he could never quite escape. And the wrestler was gone too. The ferocious, precise, world-class competitor who had folded men in half with powerbombs and outworked the best in Japan. That man never came back. Gordy returned to the ring. He came back for one more All-Japan tour in 1994 before finally leaving the company that had been his home for over a decade. But everyone could see it. The magic was gone. His timing, his reflexes, his instincts, the things that had made him great, had been damaged along with everything else. He was, in the painful words used to describe him, a shell of his former self. But he kept going, because wrestling was all he knew. It was who he was. And even diminished, the name Terry Gordy still carried weight and meaning throughout the industry. In 1996, Terry Gordy returned to the World Wrestling Federation for the last significant run of his career. But he did not return as Terry Gordy. He was repackaged under a mask, given the sinister name, the Executioner, presented as a hired assassin. He wore a hood and carried an axe, and he was aligned with the deranged character Mankind, both of them managed by the ghoulish Paul Bearer. He made his big debut helping Mankind defeat The Undertaker in a buried alive match, smashing the dead man with a shovel. He then had a short program with The Undertaker before quietly leaving the company in early 1997. Years later, the truth behind that gimmick came out, and it is one of the more poignant details in the whole story. According to Bruce Pritchard, a longtime World Wrestling Federation producer and executive, the reason Terry Gordy was given a mask was to protect him. Vince McMahon had genuine doubts about whether Gordy could still perform at a high level after his injuries. The mask meant that if things went badly, if he couldn't go, his legacy would not be tarnished. Nobody would have to know it was the great Terry Gordy struggling under there. If he had shown he could still perform, there would have been a plan to unmask him and reveal the legend to the world. And it has been said that the whole thing was done largely as a favor to his old partner Michael Hayes, who by then worked for the company, the masters of the wrestling business, quietly trying to preserve the dignity of a fallen legend. That was what the Executioner really was. The rest of Terry Gordy's career was spent grinding it out on the independent circuit, taking bookings where he could find them. He wrestled for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where he actually won their heavyweight championship. He turned up in Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, challenging for their world title and reuniting briefly with his old partner Steve Williams. He even went back to Japan to wrestle brutal, bloody death matches for a hardcore promotion, a far cry from the world-class technical wars of his prime. He was chasing something, maybe the feeling of what he used to have, maybe just a paycheck, maybe just the only life he had ever known. He kept lacing up his boots year after year, a legend fading into the background of a business that was rapidly changing around him. His final match took place in Japan in February of 2001. Terry Gordy came from wrestling, and he passed the business down. His son, Ray Gordy, followed him into the ring and would go on to wrestle for WWE under the names Jesse and Slam Master Jay. His daughter Miranda became a wrestler as well, competing on the independent circuit and, like her father before her, in Japan. The Gordy name lived on. But Terry himself was running out of time. Years of hard living, of the punishing road lifestyle, of substance abuse, of the toll that professional wrestling extracts from every man who gives his life to it, had worn his body down far beyond his years. On the 16th of July, 2001, Terry Gordy was found dead in his home in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee. He had suffered a heart attack caused by a blood clot. He was just 40 years old. 40 years old. Let that sink in. A man who had started wrestling at 13, who had given nearly 3 decades of his life to the business, who had conquered 2 continents and thrilled millions of fans, was gone before he ever reached middle age. His heart, the heart that had already stopped once in a Tokyo hospital more than a decade earlier, finally gave out for good. The tributes poured in from across the wrestling world. His old partner Michael Hayes, the brother he had built a legend with, mourned him deeply. Stan Hansen, the fearsome legend who had both fought Gordy and teamed with him in Japan, praised him as one of the very best workers he had ever shared a ring with. And that word, worker, is the highest compliment in wrestling. It means a master of the craft, a man who truly understood the art form. That was how his peers remembered Terry Gordy. Not as the guy in the mask, not as the shell he became after the coma, but as the artist, the prodigy, the best of the best. In the years since his death, the wrestling world has worked to make sure Terry Gordy is not forgotten. In 2014, he was inducted into the Southern Wrestling Hall of Fame. The following year, in 2015, the Fabulous Freebirds were inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum. And in 2016, the moment that mattered most, the Fabulous Freebirds were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Terry Gordy was inducted by his own son, Ray, who stood on that stage and accepted the honor on behalf of a father who was no longer there to receive it. The prodigy from Chattanooga, immortalized at last on the industry's grandest stage. More recently, his life and death were explored in an episode of the acclaimed documentary series Dark Side of the Ring, introducing a whole new generation of fans to a story most of them had never heard. The story of the greatest wrestler they never knew existed. So how do we make sense of Terry Gordy? How do we hold all of these pieces together? On one hand, he is one of the most gifted performers who ever lived, a genuine wrestling prodigy who was working professional matches as a child and main eventing arenas as a teenager. A man who was so good, so complete an athlete, that hardened veterans who saw everyone still name him among the very best they ever encountered. He pioneered entrance music and the Freebird rule. He anchored one of the hottest feuds in wrestling history against the Von Erichs. He became a bona fide legend in Japan and won the sport's most demanding championships. As one half of the Miracle Violence connection, he stood atop the entire tag team wrestling world. That is a career that most performers could only dream of. On the other hand, his story is a warning, a reminder of the dark side of that glamorous, larger-than-life world. The road, the parties, the substances, the relentless grind that never stopped. The same lifestyle that made these men into gods also planted the seeds of their destruction. Terry Gordy's near-fatal collapse in Tokyo, and then the coma that stole his gifts and his future, and finally his death at 40, are all chapters of the same cautionary tale. It is a tale that wrestling has told far too many times, with far too many of its brightest stars. There is something almost unbearably sad about the shape of his life when you lay it out end to end. He gave himself to this business earlier than almost anyone, walking into a wrestling ring as a 13-year-old boy who should have been in a classroom. He gave it his youth, his body, his health, and eventually his life. And the business, for all the glory it handed him, gave a great deal of it back in pain. That is the bargain so many of these men made, often without fully understanding the terms until it was far too late to renegotiate. But maybe the thing to hold on to is this. When you strip away the tragedy, when you look past the mask and the fog and the sad ending, what remains is the work, the matches, the moments, the image of a young Terry Gordy in his prime, moving through a wrestling ring with a grace and a power that few big men have ever possessed, doing the impossible and making it look easy. That is worth remembering. That deserves to be remembered. Because Terry Bam Bam Gordy was, at his peak, as good as anyone who ever did it. A prodigy who gave his entire life to professional wrestling, quite literally from childhood to the grave. And even if the world at large has largely forgotten his name, the people who know, the wrestlers and the historians and the die-hard fans who understand what they are looking at, They will tell you the same thing every single time. He was not simply a great big man. He was not merely a member of a legendary faction or a dangerous opponent from another era. He was one of the most naturally gifted professional wrestlers who ever lived, and he was gone far, far too soon. If you enjoyed this deep dive into this territory wrestling legend, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the golden age of professional wrestling, because there are so many more of these tales to tell, legends who deserve to be remembered. Until next time.